jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. You jibber jab, bamboozle, nuka noozle, bippity bop, she-gall. I mean, you keep on talking, but you don't know where to turn it off.
Welcome to the weekend. I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute. You're watching Independent Thinking, so you're feeling warm out there. To talk to us about global warming, one of my favorite subjects, Pat Michaels from the CATO Institute. Glad to have you.
Hi, John. Good to be here.
Welcome to Colorado. How big was your carbon footprint when you came out?
I bought offsets.
Oh, you bought offsets.
Of course,
okay.
Please. Of course, nobody knows where those offsets go, but
other things.
Just kidding.
Another great CATO book that you can get from Amazon.com, of course, Climate of Extremes. Am I wrong, or am I seeing an amazing amount of literature coming out that challenges the so-called consensus on global warming?
Well, there's no doubt that global warming science is hardly settled. President Obama likes to say that the science is clear. It's not clear at all. We haven't seen net temperature change in the global surface temperature for a dozen years now. And the warming that's been observed, the warming trends are at or below the significance limits of our computer models. So something is wrong, obviously. Nobody wants to backtrack and say, God, you know, we might have cried wolf, but that could be the case.
What I found encouraging was, I think it was a Rasmussen poll that came out just recently that showed that there's a growing number of people who are becoming skeptical to the idea that global warming is a largely man-made phenomenon. I found this pretty interesting. I mean, right now we're going on this assumption that everybody accepts with full belief that global warming is largely a man-made issue. I'm starting to see that facade is starting to break apart. Am I right on that?
I think what's going on is a little bit more subtle. I think, as a scientist, I will tell you that much of the warming of the second part of the 20th century probably has something to do with people. But it's been modest and it's been small, certainly smaller than most people would have projected. And when we look at these polls, there have been three of them, Rasmussen, Gallup, and there was another one, in which people are asked to rank issues for, you know, crime, education, et cetera, and global warming. Which do you think should be a priority? And global warming, if there's 20 issues out there, will usually come in dead last. And the people who think global warming is serious and bad and awful, that number is going down over time. It's reaching lower levels. Now, why? I have a feeling that the people who created the climate of extremes, and that's what I talk about in my book, have put forth such shrill rhetoric and such crazy scenes that people are turned off. They see their lives are going on, they see the temperature curve not going up, and they say, you know, come on, stop it.
Let's go backward in history. You look old enough to remember that we weren't supposed to be warming. We were supposed to be cooling. I remember in the 70s, the growing consensus was we were going into a period of another mini ice age. That changed around real quickly. Talk to me a little bit about the science of this.
It's real interesting to watch that. You know, it's almost like scientists are following, not leading on this issue. What happened in the mid-1970s, the first so-called global temperature histories came out. And they showed a tremendous drop in temperature from 1950 through the late 1960s, early 1970s. And this got people all scared. Well, it turns out that almost all those temperature records were from the land areas of the northern hemisphere. And land temperatures, particularly in high latitudes, bounce around a lot more than others. And eventually those temperature records were modified and corrected. And, well, there wasn't so much cooling after all. So now there wasn't a scare of an ice age. In other words, what people are doing is they're responding to what the temperature record does rather than being very prospective about the future.
When we hear about the consensus,
what consensus?
The consensus. Talk to me about that. That, you know, they come up with these terrific numbers. They talk about the UN organization, the climate study group that
I'm a member of that panel.
Right. So give me an idea. When they say consensus, tell me how many scientists, legitimate scientists, question the idea of man-made, largely man-made global warming.
Well, I think we ought to draw. I think the way we ought to split the issue is how many scientists think that this is the end of the world issue, and that if you don't do something about it now, you're going to go to heck in a handcart. And the answer to that is not all that many. In fact, there are a few out there. They're very vocal and they get a lot of press. But I'd say most scientists don't believe that because they look at the temperature histories that we have, and they can look at the climate models that we have, and they can see that it's not warming up.
Can we make a detour and
rate.
let's define scientist? Now you say that you're a scientist. For all I know, you might study eyebrow growth on pygmies. I don't know. So tell me, what is a scientist that we should consider as a valid source on climate change, and are you one of those scientists?
Yeah, I actually have a degree in ecological climatology. There are not that many climate science PhDs. A lot of them are either the geography departments or physical science departments that are particularly in climatology, but the person's work might have been on climate. I would suspect there are no more than 60. This is just a wild guess, actual, real PhDs in the subject. But how many people have been trained in climate science and study climate? I don't know, a few hundred at the doctoral level, 300 or 400.
In this country or on the planet?
I would say around the world.
That few?
Yeah, it was not a very popular profession. It was considered sort of the stepchild of meteorology. People didn't go into it. They went into meteorology.
Meteorology being the weather.
The weather, forecasting, the dynamic models. If you wanted to do computer modeling way back when, you didn't do climate modeling because
when
nobody
is way
cared.
Back when?
20, 30 years ago, when the PhDs that were now sort of mature and doing the television talk shows and things like that were minted. The computer models were for weather forecasting. If that's where you wanted to go to study the dynamics of the atmosphere and to do cool stuff, you went into meteorology, not climatology. And then all of a sudden, climatology became hot. Why? Because the global temperature started to go up. Again, science followed fact. It didn't project fact. And now everybody calls themselves a climatologist. People with very, very little training, people with a lot of training, they can talk about their subject.
So when we talk about a climatologist, what exactly is a climatologist? When we talk about somebody who is qualified, so when they say, here's my opinion, and I should say, who are you? And they can say, I'm a climatologist.
I would say a person who has a track record in academia or in think tank world and publishes on climate and publishes a lot on climate and knows the literature backwards and forwards. That person is a climatologist. You can find people who can say a lot of things on this that don't publish anything. You might not even write any books on the subject. You can find people who have published a lot and won't say very much at all. There's a large range, a large spectrum of individuals in this subject.
All right. So given what you consider or what can be defended as true climatologists,
right,
how many of them, give me some percentages, how many of them believe that global warming is a largely man-made phenomenon?
Oh, I'd say a very large percentage, but that's not the point. Whether or not people warm the planet, and I make this point in the book repeatedly, is not really what the matter is. The matter is the warming something that is dangerous, scary? If we don't do something about it right now and spend a lot of money trying to stop it, can we stop it? Or is it something that's modest and moderate? And when you look at the temperature data, it becomes quite apparent that it's at the low end of the range of projections that have been made. And so the alarmists are a minority because they're not supported by the data, but they get a lot of press.
I remember the population bomb guys,
Oh,
Paul
sure.
Ehrlich guys who said by the year 2000, the UK would become uninhabitable because there would be so many people on it, that we'd have 10 billion people on the planet, and it never came true.
No, of course not.
It's ridiculous now. Do you believe the same sort of fear-mongering that we see in global warming, it's going to be the same thing?
I think the same dynamic is operating. There was the population bomb in 1970. The limits to growth was published that said that air would be unbreathable by the year 2000 and we'd be out of petroleum. And then acid rain came along, and
I forgot about acid rain.
I forgot about acid rain.
I forgot about acid rain.
Yeah, I know.